A team of researchers in China just used a quantum computer to break encryption. That sentence alone went viral. It got clipped, screenshotted, and turned into panicked headlines warning that the lock protecting your bank account, your crypto wallet, and your private messages had just been picked open by a machine on the other side of the world. People are scared. Some of them should be. Most of them are scared of the wrong thing. Because the real story here is not the one that trended. The real story is buried underneath it, and it is actually worse, in a much quieter and much more believable way. But before we get there, we have to deal with the headline everyone already saw, because it is only half true, and the missing half is where this gets interesting. Here is what actually happened. A research team in China, working with hardware built by a company called D-Wave, used a type of quantum computer called a quantum annealer to factor a small number protected by RSA encryption. RSA is the math behind a huge chunk of the internet's security. Banking, messaging, login systems, all of it leans on the fact that multiplying two huge prime numbers together is easy, but splitting that giant number back into its two primes is brutally hard, even for supercomputers. The Chinese team split one. That part is true. The number they cracked was 22 bits long. 22 bits sounds technical, so let's translate it. A number that small could be factored by an ordinary smartphone in a few seconds. Real-world RSA encryption today runs on 2048-bit keys. The gap between 22 bits and 2048 bits is not a gap you close with a few more years of research. It is the difference between picking a bike lock and announcing you broke into a bank vault. That is the humiliation hiding inside the original headline, and almost nobody mentioned it. It gets worse for the panic narrative, not better. Security researchers looked at the same paper everyone was sharing and started pushing back almost immediately. RSA's own security team called the coverage misleading. Independent cryptographers said the result did not come close to threatening modern encryption. One analysis flatly compared the experiment to popping a padlock and calling it a bank heist. The people who actually understand this math, the ones with the most reason to be alarmed if it were true, were the ones rolling their eyes the hardest. That should tell you something. When the experts who would benefit from panic instead spend their time correcting the record, that is usually a sign the panic is the product, not the discovery. But here is where it gets more complicated, because dismissing this entirely would be its own kind of dishonest. The Chinese team did not just stop at 22 bits. Later work pushed the number up to around 50 bits, and reports describe a 90-bit result the following year. The number kept climbing. So did the gap between what was claimed and what was actually threatened, because climbing from 22 bits to 90 bits is still nowhere near 2048. Still, the direction matters. A line that keeps moving in one direction, even slowly, is worth watching. Here is the technical detail that explains why none of this should have gone viral as an encryption apocalypse in the first place. The machine used in these experiments was a quantum annealer. That is not the same thing as the kind of quantum computer that is actually theorized to threaten RSA at scale. The real danger, the one cryptographers have been warning about for decades, comes from something called Shor's algorithm, which only runs on a different category of hardware, called gate-based quantum computers. A quantum annealer is built to solve optimization problems. It was never designed to run Shor's algorithm at all. So, the machine that supposedly cracked the internet's security was not even the type of machine capable of doing that job at real scale. This is not a small technicality. It is the entire reason experts were unimpressed while social media was panicking. There is also a word in that original headline that deserves its own correction, because it is doing more emotional work than it should. Passwords. Most of your actual passwords, the ones for your email, your bank, your streaming accounts, are not protected by RSA encryption at all. They are protected by hashing, a different process that turns your password into a scrambled value a server can check without ever storing the real thing. Quantum computers are far less effective against that kind of hashing than they are against RSA-style encryption, and the fix for that side is mostly just using longer hashes, which is already happening. So no, this is not really a story about your Netflix login getting cracked open. It is a story about the encryption protecting the connection your password travels through, the lock around your banking session, your messaging app, your crypto wallet, and your medical records. That distinction matters, because getting it wrong in either direction, dismissing the threat completely or screaming that every password on Earth is compromised. Both end up being dishonest in their own way. So if the China headline was mostly noise, why does any of this matter? Because while everyone was arguing about a 22-bit number, a much more serious development happened somewhere else entirely, and almost nobody covered it with the same energy. In March of this year, Google's quantum AI team published research on a different kind of encryption, called elliptic curve cryptography. This is the encryption used to protect Bitcoin, Ethereum, and a large share of modern secure communication. Google's research suggested that breaking it might require far fewer qubits than anyone had assumed, potentially under 500,000 physical qubits to do real damage. That is still a number current quantum computers do not have. But it is a dramatically smaller number than the millions of qubits experts use to quote as the safe distance between today and a real threat. The real warning shot did not come from a viral headline. It came from a research paper most people never saw, and the goalposts did not stop moving there. A separate preprint from researchers connected to Caltech, Berkeley, and a company called Oratomic estimated that a different kind of quantum hardware, built from neutral atoms, could potentially run Shor's algorithm with as few as 10 to 26,000 qubits. Under that estimate, a system in that range could threaten Bitcoin-style encryption in a matter of days. Breaking something like RSA 2048 would still take significantly more resources. This is a preprint, not a finished, peer-reviewed result, so treat it as an estimate, not a certainty. But for years, the public was told the safe number was in the millions. Now, serious researchers, not hype merchants, are quietly testing whether the real number is in the tens of thousands. That is the actual story that should have trended. Instead, it got buried under a fake one. Here is why that buried story should bother you more than the viral one ever did. There is a concept security professionals call harvest now, decrypt later. It works like this. An attacker does not need a working quantum computer today to steal your encrypted data today. They just need to record it. Intercepted traffic, stolen backups, copied databases, all of it can sit untouched for years. The attacker is betting that, eventually, a quantum computer capable of breaking that old encryption will exist. And when it does, everything they stored becomes readable all at once. Institutions like the Federal Reserve and the Bank of Israel have already flagged this as a present-day risk, not a future one. That is the part that should actually sit with you. The theft, if it is happening, already happened. The unlocking just has not happened yet. This is exactly why the China story and the Google story matter together instead of separately. One was hype dressed up as a breakthrough. The other was a quiet, credible signal that the real threat is arriving faster than the old estimates promised. Confusing the two means people either panic over nothing or relax over something they should not be relaxing over. Neither reaction is the right one. So, is there an actual fix, or is this just a slow-motion countdown with no exit? There is a fix, and it already exists. It is just not finished being deployed, and it is about as unglamorous as cybersecurity gets. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, finalized its first set of quantum-resistant encryption standards in August of 2024. In March of 2025, it added another algorithm, called HQC, as a backup, specifically because it is built on different math than the other finalists, in case one entire approach turns out to have a weakness nobody saw coming. A new signature standard is expected later this year, with full finalization expected in 2027. None of this got a viral headline. None of it has a dramatic name or a press conference designed to trend. It is paperwork, standards documents, specifications that engineers quietly fold into software over years, not days. That is the part people are angry about once they understand it. The actual defense against this entire problem has existed in finished form since 2024, and most of the systems protecting your data have not switched over to it yet. Migrating something like RSA out of global banking infrastructure, government communication, and consumer apps takes years of coordination, testing, and rollout. Most organizations have not started. Some have barely heard the term post-quantum cryptography. The fix is real. The urgency to actually install it is not matching the timeline the math is setting. Crypto and blockchain communities reacted to this faster than almost anyone else, and that reaction tells you something. Bitcoin and Ethereum rely directly on the kind of elliptic curve encryption Google's research is targeting. So the people with real money sitting on the line paid far more attention to a quiet research paper than to a viral headline about a 22-bit number. Security researchers spent the same window correcting the record on China, while quietly flagging the Google result as the one worth tracking. Risk analysts at financial institutions are already writing reports, treating harvest now, decrypt later as something to plan around today, not in some distant hypothetical future. None of these groups were shouting. They were just paying attention to the right thing while everyone else argued about the wrong one. It is also worth saying that the China story was not even the only fake fire alarm this year. In March, a company calling itself the Advanced Quantum Technologies Institute announced something called the JVG algorithm, claiming it could cut the resources needed to break RSA by a factor of 1,000. That claim spread across social media the same way the China story did, complete with predictions that the entire internet's encryption was about to collapse within hours. Independent fact-checkers and the broader research community looked at the claim and found it was not validated. It did not hold up. This is the pattern worth noticing. Every few months, a dramatic quantum headline detonates online, gets shared by people who never read past the first sentence, and quietly gets walked back by the people who actually checked the math. That cycle is exhausting, and it is also exactly why a genuinely serious signal, like the Google research, can slip past most people completely unnoticed. The noise is drowning out the signal, repeatedly, on a schedule. Now for the part that keeps this honest, instead of turning it into fear-mongering. No quantum computer that exists today can break real-world RSA or elliptic curve encryption. None. Not the Chinese annealer, not Google's research hardware, not the neutral atom systems in early preprints. The estimates for what it would actually take to break something like RSA 2048 still range wildly, anywhere from tens of thousands of qubits to numbers in the millions, depending entirely on which architecture and which algorithm improvements you believe. Experts disagree on the exact number, and that disagreement itself is worth sitting with. It is not the kind of disagreement that says, this will never happen. It is the kind that says, nobody is fully certain how close it already is. Your passwords are not being cracked tonight. That part is simply not true, no matter how many thumbnails claim otherwise. But the assumption that this was decades away, safely outside anyone's lifetime planning, is no longer holding up the way it used to. And that is really what this whole story is about. Once you strip away the viral packaging, it was never really about China. China's experiment was real, small, and wildly overstated by people who either misunderstood it or knew exactly how well a scary headline performs. The actual story is that the math underneath the internet's encryption has a quietly shrinking safety margin, season after season, while almost nobody outside cybersecurity circles is watching the number move. The fix exists. It has existed for 2 years. It just has not been finished installing in the systems holding your data, your money, and your conversations. So here is the question worth sitting with after the video ends, not during it. If someone is willing to steal your encrypted data today and simply wait 10 years to read it, the real test is not whether quantum computers can break encryption right now. They mostly cannot. The real test is whether the people responsible for protecting that data are moving anywhere near as fast as the people trying to eventually unlock it. Right now, based on everything that is actually verified, the honest answer is not yet.